This episode of Trifles is made possible by listeners like you who support us on Patreon and Substack. To learn more, go to patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the lodger was veiled, the face was yellow, and the valley was fearsome, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder what kind of medical practice Dr. Watson actually ran? Or about the number of Holmes's monographs? Or how much the rent was at 221B Baker Street?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 395, Victorian Aventuresses. Well, hello and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we look into the details in the stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And Burt, are you ready for a little bit of an adventure here?
Oh, I am. I've got my Tilly hat, my popcorn for emergencies, and my hiking staff, and my...
You bring a whole staff of people with you when you hike?
Oh, yes, I do. You know, a lot of people over the years have spent a lot of time on organization design, and I've always found that my line and my staff comfort me.
Well, there will be a line out the door for this episode. This is part of our monthly, end of month, I should say, episodes where we have a drawing. We actually will put all of our supporters' names into a big revolving drum and pick them out at random. Oh, no, wait. I'm sorry. We have the spinning prize wheel. That's off camera here. We are doing another video version of this episode. So if you are a supporter on Patreon or on Substack, you will have access to a video episode. We did this last week, and we already got some feedback from one of our audience members. Just want to make sure I quote him correctly. It was...
Shouldn't be difficult to quote. I think it was "Stop it," wasn't it? Just stop it.
That was pretty much it. Who was it? I don't remember who commented here. Let me open up the episode. It looks like, Jesse Martin. He said, "How do I turn off the video?" Yeah. Well, that's extra. If you support us at the $25 a month level, you will have the ability to shut our video off.
Friends, and if you support us at the $50 a month level, I will put a paper bag on my head.
And at the $100 a month level, you don't have to listen to us at all. Woo. That's the beauty of it. You shut the audio off, too. Like
that Marx Brothers routine where Groucho finally says to Chico, "How much if you don't rehearse?" And Chico says, "You couldn't afford it."
Exactly. Oh, well, there is no rehearsing going on here, as I'm sure you will hear. But I did refer to Patreon and Substack. You can find us there at patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com. Your support helps us do the show. And in this case, we also have a thank you gift that's going out to Kai Johansson, who has supplied us with the idea behind this episode. So I think we should just get right to it. Well, Victorian Adventuresses. You know, there is one adventuress that stands out above all others, and there actually is an entire Sherlockian society named for adventuresses, the Adventuresses of Sherlock Holmes. But Burt, who do we know in the stories that stands out as an adventuress? And then let's explore what exactly an adventuress is.
Well, of course, it is the woman Irene Adler, who is, I think, the first time we hear about Irene. She's introduced to us, isn't she, as the well-known adventuress?
Yes.
Isn't that exactly how she greets us?
Yeah.
And in the end, and thanks, to our listener who gave us this topic, we've been doing a little reading about adventuresses, and found out, of course, that the phrase has become diluted in modern usage. And today it's, I think, if anyone worries about the word adventurous at all, it's thought as being slightly disapproving. But for the Victorian era, it was very specific and very scandalous. It was generally used as the female version of adventure. And while there was a cultural and moral disapproval associated with women acting willfully and independently and in the same way as a man, by the 1820s, the word had sort of acquired a definition. A woman who would use any means, no matter how immoral, to gain a position. And more specifically, I think it meant the idea a woman who was out to snare a nobleman in marriage or some sort of connection.
Oh, those poor, unsuspecting and innocent noblemen, right?
Yes, all they had to go for them was a fortune and a weak chin. And there were all those women lining up with their corsets. It was like a shooting gallery for them.
Yeah. Well, this idea we've discovered of a woman using sex to snare a nobleman, this was really, I think, popularized by William Makepeace Thackeray in Vanity Fair, which was about 1847, 1848. I think that was released in a serial manner. And I'm not sure which
Cornflakes. I think it was Cornflakes, wasn't it?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I can't deny that.
Well, as a cereal, you mean?
Oh no, cornflakes. That didn't come into play until the 1880s. It would have been Rice Krispies.
Oh,
sorry.
That's right.
Vanity Fair.
Yeah, Vanity Fair.
Well, yeah. Okay, so that would have been Becky Sharp in Vanity Fair. So, what we saw happen is in the remaining 4 decades in Victorian England, there was a rise of men publicly displaying their mistresses, and that became, I guess, more widely acceptable, or at least more widely understood, and it wasn't necessarily as scandalous as it had been in the earlier part of Victorian society. From roughly, I think, 1860, kept women, courtesans, demi-mondaines, grand horizontales, petty horsebreakers, great strumpets. These are all terms that we've seen that refer to women of the Victorian age who accepted money from their lovers in exchange for company and physical affection. So they weren't only not socially ostracized by high society, but they were accepted. They would go to parties and events and even be idolized by young women and watched with great admiration by up-and-coming mothers and daughters. So, one might even say that this was a profession of sorts, although not necessarily under the same guise as the world's oldest profession.
Well, we also owe a lot, I think, about that to Madame du Barry, in the 18th century, who became the King of France's official mistress and moved into Versailles, around 1770 or something like that. And, people, she was not a big hit with Marie Antoinette, who,
as you can imagine.
Yeah. But, Madame du Barry was a patron of, various painters and craftspeople and things like that, and helped nurture, sort of the style at Versailles. But I think she was, maybe from the standpoint of the 18th century, the sort of the classic idea of an adventuress, I guess, only because of her relationship with the king and how visible she was.
Yeah. Well, and I think what happened, and this is a typical evolution of society as something becomes more recognized, or at least more publicly seen, it becomes more socially acceptable. And what you saw over the ensuing century is that these women were seen not as scandalous, but as unconventional. Right? They were living out a life that women typically did not have available to them at the time. They were, wealthy. They were able to speak their minds without fear of retribution. They could do what they wanted, go where they wanted, see who they wanted. There's a piece that's referenced here by Ignacio Ramos Gay, who says the character of the adventuress constitutes the evolution of the classical prostitute within a bourgeois society towards a refined aestheticism dominated by elegance, taste, and manners. So by imbuing it with that kind of upper class etiquette and society, it in some ways granted it legitimacy.
Well, and it's that legitimacy that extends to Irene Adler, because she is, I think, an admirable character in the cases of Sherlock Holmes. He certainly admires, I would think, her cleverness, and accepts his defeat from the standpoint of Sherlock Holmes, accepts his defeat as gracefully, I think, as he possibly can. And that's one of the nice things, I think, about the cases of Sherlock Holmes. But there is only one other character who comes in contact with Sherlock Holmes who could be called an adventurer, and has a far different, it's really on the other end of the spectrum when it comes to adventuring. And who is that? Be Scott? Who? Yes, who is it?
It could be only Mrs. Hudson.
Right, but she didn't use her womanly wiles to lure in Holmes and Watson. It was a good rent, and of course,
princely rent. Mrs. Hudson did okay
Great
in
location,
that arrangement. Let's just say,
and the tea. I think the tea was probably.
Yes. And her breakfasts.
Breakfast.
No, Isadora Klein in the Three Gables.
Yes.
Right. Does the name Isadora Klein mean nothing to you? She was, of course, the celebrated beauty. There was never a woman to touch her. She's pure Spanish, the real blood of the masterful conquistadors, and her people have been leaders in Pernambuco for generations. She married the aged German sugar king, Klein, and presently found herself the richest as well as the most lovely widow upon earth. Then there was an interval of adventure when she pleased her own tastes. She had several lovers, and Douglas Maberly, one of the most striking men in London, was one of them. It was, by all accounts, more than an adventure with him. So interesting there that the term adventure is used for, in place of escort or prostitute or affair even. It's that term, adventure, that's applied to Isadora Klein.
Well, and it's a wonderful introduction by Sherlock Holmes to Isadora Klein. He goes on to say, but she is the belle dame sans merci, the beautiful lady without compassion. When her caprice is satisfied, the matter is ended, and if the other party in the matter can't take her word for it, she knows how to bring it home to him. And now Holmes tells us she's about to marry someone else, the young Duke of Lomond, who might almost be her son.
She's locked in with Lomond. Huh?
She is locked in with Willie. Willie was actually the name of the Duke of Lomond. And he was out most of the time trying to sell things, mostly photographs of the monster. And
But interestingly, when you look at these two bookends of Aventuresses happening at both the beginning, the adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and then the end, in the casebook of Sherlock Holmes, spanning almost 40 years, at 35 years. Both are women who, are mentioned as adventuresses or involved in adventures. They have been wronged or are almost on the verge of being wronged by their former lovers and are taking unconventional and sometimes criminal methods to go about preventing their reputations from being besmirched.
Well, it's true. It's interesting. And in the chorus, I like the way you put that, bookends at the beginning and at the end of the canon, because, of course, Three Gables is in the casebook. But along the way, we meet so many other women who have been, many of them victimized, but many of them, too, are kind of Latin yet English beauties, I think, as Chris Redman has observed. And that includes Beryl Garcia of The Hound of the Baskervilles, and Maria Pinto Gibson of Thorbridge, and Amelia Luca of The Red Circle. So you wouldn't call any of these people adventuresses, but it's an interesting, way to think about it. Irene Adler, these other women, and then ending with Isadora Klein.
Well, and even to a certain extent, Kitty Winter.
Oh, right.
And The Illustrious Client. Although she's not someone of that upper class society, I think she does tend to fall more toward the prostitution end of things, but she's still a sympathetic character and has been cruelly used by Baron Gruner in that case.
Yeah. Well,
the adventures continue here on Trifles, because it is time now to look at the big prize wheel over here, just off camera. I'm going to give it a spin in just a moment, because all of our Patreon and Substack supporters, those paid supporters, their names are entered into this drawing, and we bring out the prize wheel here and we give it a spin. Come on, prize wheel. You can do it.
Well, you've got some reach. It's, it's right over here in my office.
It is. Yeah. Goodness. Okay, and it looks like we have our number. It is 65, and that means it is Dave Schloen. Dave, congratulations. We will have a copy of a back issue of the Baker Street Journal going out to you. So thank you. And if you'd like to be like Dave, if you'd like to win, just go to patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com and support us at the level that works for you. Okay, Bert, any other adventures you care to share with us at this point?
No. I may sort of throw out some things from the refrigerator that have been there too long. I think that's about as much excitement as I could stand for the rest of today.
Whatever you do, don't throw out your trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
Some 10 years ago, during a lengthy visit to Warsaw, I made the acquaintance of the well-known adventuress, Irene Adler.